So, what exactly is diet culture, and how might it be negatively or positively impacting your day to day life?
Hey everyone, this is Aaron and Juwan, and you're listening to Wellness for Real People. This show is for people who are on the go, busy, and looking for ways to live their best lives. We focus on wellness topics in mindfulness, exercise, diet, and sleep, and share quick, actionable tactics to improve your health and wellness. We're not perfect, but we're trying to get a little better each day. Let's grow on this journey together.
We're going to dive into that today in another episode of Wellness for Real People. My name is Juwan, here with my co host Aaron. And today we're discussing a very interesting article from the University of Colorado Health and Wellness Services. This article is diving deep into diet culture, what that culture looks like, um, and a few questions around, can it be harmful, and how you might find support for yourself or others if you find yourself being affected by
Mhm.
some of these negative impacts of diet culture. So, before we get into the specifics, Aaron, any kind of high level, kind of big takeaways that stood out for you reading this article?
Yeah, I think it's like, and we'll get into the specifics, but I think the way it kicks it off when it talks about what diet culture kind of represents is a set of systematic beliefs that affect everyone's culture. And then it kind of idealizes thinness as a signal of status, health, and moral virtue. And I was like, wow, that takes it pretty far. But if you think about it, a lot of times the people, not always, but a lot of times the people that you see at certain levels of success look a certain kind of way. And what this article suggests is oftentimes those people in those, thinner bodies are benefiting from unspoken privileges that those in larger bodies don't because of diet culture and what the mentality is behind that. And those in larger bodies are assumed to be unhealthier or not worthy of dignity or should be ashamed of how they look or eat. And I know those feelings translate to people that internalize them, and it might be sabotaging more than just the things that they eat, but just how they feel, how they perform at work, how they feel around friends and family members, or just in general when they're looking at social media platforms or on television, like how that perception is being reflected back to them. So I thought it was pretty deep just the way it got kicked off. And I was like, wow, yeah, I didn't really think about that.
Yeah,
There's definitely
yeah,
some underlying things that are probably happening to me as I'm trying to go through my health journey. And I'm like, man, maybe I'm like subject to this as well. So anyway,
yeah.
I'll let you kind of jump in there.
No, it's a great insights, and I think the point you mentioned, right, is it's systemic and it's pervasive throughout,
Mhm.
throughout society and many different subcultures, right? And um, that's really really powerful because it's that makes it sometimes very difficult to identify, and then if
Yeah.
it's hard to identify, it's hard to kind of correct and address. One of the points that I thought was really interesting was they said, under diet culture, people may feel pressure to lose weight, even if they live in a smaller body or are in good health, regardless of, their size, right? So when we hear about things like body dysmorphia and these kinds of things,
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
think that kind of speaks to that. It says we often see these tenets play out across media platforms like social media, television, magazines, and advertisements. Um, and that just kind of reminds me, even on social media, there's this whole like gym fitness culture kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's like it's this whole gym aesthetic, and it's you're scrolling through, and you feel like sometimes I feel like, oh man, if I don't look like this,
Yeah.
oh man, I'm like really doing something wrong, like But then they like get into it, you got to be careful about the what you consume because oftentimes some of the images and things that we see are not actually real or true, right? They're fabricated or using filters, right? And so I thought that was really, really, really important. So, yeah, we're kind of transitioning to the next piece, which is kind of what does that diet culture look like? And a few points that the authors mentioned was, again, this kind of body idealization, which can lead to these sometimes filters and altered images. A lot of times, people you see a lot of people giving unqualified advice, which I thought was also really, really, really important. I think one of the things we try to do on this show, we're not necessarily experts on all of these topics, but we try to pull from sources that are vetted, by experts, right? And so things like this, right? Exactly from, the University of Colorado,
Universities,
right?
medical
Uh,
journals, like
yeah.
yes.
hmm 'Cause there's a
Yeah.
lot of advice out there, and you got to be
Yeah.
very careful about what we listen to, because that could shape a lot of things. So one specific recommendation they mentioned was, when searching for advice, particularly about, food and diet, be sure to look for individuals who are registered dietitian nutritionists or folks who have a PhD in nutrition scientists. Right, at least that's a starting point that they've done done the research and
Yeah.
have some qualifications. But again, even with the qualifications, you still need to be mindful and read a number of sources and check with consult your your healthcare team. So I
Yeah.
think yeah, that's really really important.
I thought it
What
was
are you
one
gonna
that
say?
stood out too in that section when they talked about what to be wary of and be wary of things like detoxes, quick fix, or those things. And like in our show and just in general in our lives, we don't really have shortcuts or anything we're looking for. We always, kind of promote slow, steady growth, like incremental small changes are kind of what we promote. We're never out here saying, hey, take this pill or drink this thing and you're going to lose like 60 pounds. It's just like not real. It's crazy, but there's a lot of advice out there. There's a lot of products out there. So it's like really big to think about that for what you're getting promoted to on social media. You might see a lot of that and start to believe it. So just be careful.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
And the feeds, man, they try to send you a bunch of the same stuff until you believe it. So sorry, I'll let
Yeah.
you go. We could go on a rant about that all day as well.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, there's so much to unpack in this particular article. Kind of, one last piece on this section I want to talk about is this idea of earning food, right? And so, while physical activity is often beneficial for our mental and physical health, some people may use exercise as a way to exert control over their bodies, alter their appearance, or determine what they're allowed to eat, quote unquote, allowed to
Mhm.
eat. And as you mentioned, these sentiments can come from influencers or online fitness coaches who encourage clients to earn their food. And I think there's a lot of power in that, right? Like, you know, um, on the one hand, I feel like, as human beings, that like eating is a necessity, right? It is and in many ways, a right. And so the idea that you have to earn the opportunity to eat is kind of scary, but also I can also see it from the perspective of like, you know, for me personally, like being able to earn a treat at maybe like at the end of a week, right? And so it's like everything we talk about within moderation and in balance, right? Sometimes I like the idea of having a goal to work towards, like if I do these positive things, right? If I get my rest, if I, move my body, several times a week, that maybe that means I can, you know, uh, you know, have a little bit of um, of a treat, maybe a scoop of ice cream or something at the end of the week to
Yeah.
celebrate. I think that can be a positive thing, but taken too far, is that he's saying that you just if you don't do these things, you're not a good person, and therefore
You
you
don't
don't deserve
deserve
the ice
anything.
cream, right? Like that's not really helpful or positive
Yeah.
either, right? So
Right. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Totally agree.
yeah. So we've talked a lot about how this diet culture can be harmful. Some very specific things I mentioned is body dissatisfaction, food restriction may lead to food restriction, limiting certain things you can or will eat. As you mentioned, excess stress, right? All the stress of just
Mhm.
dealing with all of this and trying to count every single calorie or everything that you
Yeah.
eat.
Or restrict everything you get. Yeah.
Yeah, it could be really really stressful, can lead to social isolation and then ultimately have these negative health impacts, physical and mental and emotional impact. And so, um, as we kind of transition to, how can you find support for yourself or others as as we may be experiencing this or reckoning with, the impacts of this kind of diet culture? What are some things that stood out for you, Aaron, on this section?
Yeah, no, this one was interesting. And so, some things that are just kind of counter to what you typically hear when you like hear from like some of the influencers and things. It's like fostering food freedom. So, as opposed to tracking every single calorie, reading every label, and doing all that and exhausting yourself, try giving yourself the freedom to eat the foods you enjoy, without feeling guilty or need to make up for it later. But of course, within moderation, but not necessarily like, oh man, I got to eat this strict like thing. It's like, no, not necessarily. Like, just understanding kind of your body type and of course, getting advice from a certified professional can help you with that freedom. So you're not just following whatever the latest trend is online, or wherever you're hearing about it. I know a lot of things have come out in the past where it's like you can only eat meat and that's all you can eat. And then, before you know it, that doesn't necessarily always work. And there's other problems. And so it's one of those things where it's like, like just having that freedom to do that. And then also on top of that was intuitive eating as well too. And so stopping like the restrictive dieting and rediscovering the pleasure of eating and like of course getting help from a registered nutritionist that can help you with what to eat, but not making it such a task where it's like everything's tracked, everything's recorded, everything is restricted. So I thought those are some interesting points to take away that kind of counter some of the diet culture we've been going through.
Yeah, yeah. And again, I don't like we said, I don't like you said, everything in moderation. I don't think there's a particular problem with tracking what you eat or counting your calories if that's a part of, the plan that you're working with your, personally or with your, your healthcare team. But like you said, it's just when it gets overboard and you start being too restrictive, that it becomes, a bit of a problem. And I think with that in mind, like this point around setting goals was really, really interesting to me. It says many people set goals related to their body, appearance, weight, or shape, but what if you set goals that are not necessarily body oriented, but set goals related to improving your flexibility or running a 5K or doing 10 push-ups, gaining self-confidence, learning a new skill, all of these things that can help improve your health and well-being, just a little bit more of a positive,
Mhm.
approach to things than this kind of negative, kind of taking away approach or philosophy.
And then,
Um,
like they said, improving those health metrics like cholesterol or blood pressure, as opposed to only focusing on weight as the
mhm.
number. You might lose weight and still have issues with other things.
Right.
If you could, like, obviously you want to work with a team to help you get there, but, what do you need to work on? And we talked about that in another episode about knowing your numbers. That's a great place to start if you're setting goals.
Yeah. Yeah. So a couple last quick things before we wrap. I love this idea of refreshing your feed. So just being mindful of what you're consuming, on the television, but also on our screens and in social media, right? And so if you find that a lot of the folks or the brands that you follow are kind of in opposition to the goals that you have um and not giving you that that positive reinforcement that can be helpful for you, then it may be an opportunity to kind of pause on some of these things or even just unfollow some of these programs and really try to focus on consuming the content that's going to align with your goals and your vision. And I thought that was really, really, really powerful, something that I really haven't done maybe consciously in a while, but I think it's a good just kind of social hygiene's kind of thing to do
Yeah,
from time to
yeah,
time.
because like yeah, so like I said earlier in the show, like you could just get stuck in one way of thinking, and those images you've seen hundreds and hundreds of times, and maybe that might be contributing to your mental state. Is like if everybody looks exactly perfect because those are the images you've clicked on the most, and your feed is just of all these perfect people, that could really hurt your mentality. And then lastly, for me, is just practicing body neutrality or body positivity. And so it's just kind of more about a mindfulness of, showing yourself love, giving yourself positive affirmations like, I love that my legs allow me to run, or my body works hard and deserves love, or things like that, where you can just appreciate your body for what it is and not always beat yourself up so much and compare yourself to others.
Yeah, I thought that was a really important point, right? The neutrality piece, because body positivity, it seems like a positive thing, but taken too far, like with so many things, is can be unrealistic, right? So they bring up, they say, body positivity often asks people to love their body regardless of shape, size, or appearance. Well, that we don't always feel great about our bodies, no matter who we are, right? And
That's
so,
true.
that can cause a little bit of that cognitive dissonance, that internal conflict, right? And so I love your point around just practicing more of that body neutrality, which kind of, yeah, it's not necessarily focused on appearance, but more so focusing on, your body's just innate abilities and non-physical attributes. So I think that's a great point to kind of wrap things up on. If you're struggling with some of these issues and want to reach out and get some support, I thought they mentioned some great resources. You may focus on reaching out to a registered dietitian nutritionist to help you come up with a plan that works for you and your specific needs. Maybe find some food and body image support groups, or maybe reach out for some counseling and psychiatric services as well, if that would be helpful for you or somebody that you know. So I thought it was great that they gave some great resources towards the end of the article. But certainly a lot to think about as it relates to this diet culture, and how we can try to unwind some of the negative impacts of that on our daily lives. Any last kind of thoughts you want to leave us with there?
No, that's it, man. I just like, yeah, it's one of those things where things are going to constantly shift. They're going to be hard to stick with some days more so than others. But, again, some of the stuff we mentioned in the show, and keep surrounding yourself with positive ways to relook at things and evaluate things. But then most importantly, I think, is getting in touch with those professionals, the folks that can kind of keep you on track, setting your goals, making it more realistic for you, and not just solely relying on whatever's out there, on the social feeds or things that you've heard from friends or whatever it may be. It's just actually getting some registered help, I think, is kind of the most important piece.
Yeah, agreed. Even us, like, don't even just listen to just what we say. Like, do your own
No,
research. Yeah, yeah. Read articles. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Find.
we're here to spark ideas and have a conversation, share some, of our personal journeys. But again, like we talk about all the time, we're not the experts, but we definitely love learning from the experts, and we're going to keep doing that.
Absolutely. So thank you again for being with us, rocking with us for another episode of Wellness for Real People. We'll be back soon with another episode. And in the meantime, hope you take care.
Take care, bye.